So I want you to imagine a world where your entire future, your wealth, your physical home, like your very survival, hinges on a single, highly orchestrated social interaction.
Right, which sounds incredibly stressful.
Oh, totally. And we're not talking about, a job interview where you can just apply somewhere else if it goes poorly.
Yeah, or a bad first date where you simply swipe right on the next person.
Exactly. Imagine walking into this brightly lit room, right? A room filled with music and dancing, knowing that if you do not say the exact right thing or smile in the exact right way to the exact right person, you and your siblings could literally end up destitute.
Homeless, basically. Just cast out.
Yeah. It sounds like the premise of a dystopian sci-fi novel, or maybe some kind of high-stakes survival game. But the reality is, this was the unvarnished truth for a specific class of people in early 19th century England.
It really is a terrifying level of pressure when you actually strip away the lace and the teacups.
The teacups and the beautiful dresses, right?
Exactly. I mean, we have this tendency to view the Regency era through a lens of soft-focused romanticism. We see the empire waist gowns, the elegant country estates, the beautifully choreographed dance.
All the BBC adaptations, basically.
Right. But beneath that veneer of extreme civility was an architecture that was brutally deterministic. It was this environment of intense, high-stakes maneuvering. Every word, every introduction, and every glance carried profound economic weight.
Wow.
The ballroom was not a place of leisure. It was literally a battleground for survival.
And absolutely no one understood that battlefield better than Jane Austen.
Nobody.
So today we are doing a deep dive into her masterpiece, Pride and Prejudice, which was published in 1813. But we aren't just approaching this as some charming period piece.
No, we're definitely not.
Right. We are going to look at this text through a philosophical lens. Because honestly, beneath all that elegant banter, Austen was conducting this ruthless dissection of her society.
She really was a surgeon with a pen.
Totally. But to really grasp what she's doing, we have to look at the mind behind the work first. So who was Jane Austen in the context of this world that she was, tearing apart?
Well, she was someone operating from a place of immense quiet observation. Austen lived from 1775 to 1817, and she grew up in this profoundly intellectually stimulating environment.
Which was pretty rare for women then, right?
Incredibly rare. Her father was a clergyman who possessed an extensive, just massive library. And while women of her era were largely denied formal higher education, she spent her formative years just devouring those books.
So she was self-taught, basically.
Yeah, deeply, rigorously educated on her own terms. She read dense histories, theological tracts, philosophical texts, and she used that towering intellect to write what was essentially a critique of the aristocratic society surrounding her.
I love that. She was essentially a philosopher writing novels.
Exactly. She wrote to expose the masks that people wear, the sheer absurdity of the social constraints placed upon women, and the incredibly painful journey individuals must undergo to strip away their own egos and arrive at objective truth.
Okay, so let's jump right into the mechanism of that society. Because you really cannot talk about Pride and Prejudice without talking about its opening line.
Oh, the most famous opening line in English literature.
Right, it sets the stage for the entire philosophical inquiry. So the novel opens with, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife."
Such a brilliant line.
It really is. On the surface, it sounds like a light, breezy observation, right?
Oh.
But what is actually happening in that sentence?
It is one of the most brilliant deployments of irony in the English language. I mean, when Austen writes, "It is a truth universally acknowledged," she is immediately playing with the concept of absolute truth versus social consensus.
Right, because who is actually acknowledging this truth?
Exactly. Who is doing the acknowledging here? It certainly isn't the wealthy single man.
No, he's perfectly fine on his own.
Right. The irony is that the man in possession of a good fortune is absolutely not the one in desperate want of a wife. He has his fortune. He has his security.
So the people who are acknowledging this supposed truth are?
The economically disenfranchised women, specifically the mothers of unmarried daughters who are in desperate existential want of his fortune.
Oh, wow. So she flips it completely.
She does. The truth belongs to the society that needs the man's money, not the man himself. She is establishing right away that reality in this world is dictated by economic desperation.
That makes so much sense, and that desperation is just perfectly embodied in the Bennet family.
Oh, absolutely.
So we have Mr. and Mrs. Bennet living in this modest estate called Longbourn, and they have 5 grown daughters. 5.
Which is a huge financial liability in that era.
Huge. And the catalyst for the entire plot is the arrival of a new, wealthy bachelor to the neighborhood, Mr. Bingley. He leases an estate called Netherfield Park, and he earns between £4,000 and £5,000 a year.
Which was an astronomical sum back then.
Right. So the moment he arrives, Mrs. Bennet goes into this total matchmaking frenzy. But let's pause on the Bennet family's specific situation for a second. Because why is Mrs. Bennet so frantic? It's not just that she wants her daughters to be rich. It's a legal issue, isn't it?
Yes, and this is where we have to understand the mechanics of social determinism operating in the background. The Bennet daughters are living under a specific legal mechanism known as the entailment.
The dreaded entailment.
The dreaded entailment. And this wasn't just some quirky family tradition. It was a brutal reality of English property law designed to keep large estates intact along the male aristocratic line.
Right. So because Mr. Bennet only has daughters.
Exactly. Because he has no sons, his estate, Longbourn, is legally entailed away from his immediate family. He is essentially just a life tenant of his own home.
Wait, really? He doesn't even fully own his house.
Not in a way that matters for his family's future, no. He cannot sell the land, he cannot mortgage it to raise a dowry for his daughters, and most importantly, he cannot leave it to his wife or children when he dies.
So when he dies, what exactly happens to them?
Upon his death, the entire property goes to the closest male relative, who happens to be this distant, sycophantic cousin named Mr. Collins.
Oh, Mr. Collins.
Right. So Mrs. Bennet and her 5 daughters will inherit virtually nothing of the estate. They will literally be evicted from their home. They will face total destitution unless the daughters manage to secure financially advantageous marriages before that happens.
That is just so bleak. You think about the modern marriage market, we tend to romanticize it as this search for a soulmate.
A search for personal fulfillment.
Exactly. But for the Bennet sisters, this is more akin to a hostile corporate merger where the founders know they are about to be ousted by the board.
That is a perfect analogy.
I mean, if survival is literally on the line, if the roof over your head depends on your ability to secure a contract with a wealthy investor, which is essentially what a husband was back then,
yeah,
how does that warp the psychology of the people involved? Is there any room for actual morality or love?
Well, it creates an environment where pure panic often supersedes morality or affection. Austen uses the dynamic between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet to perfectly illustrate the different psychological coping mechanisms people deploy when faced with this kind of systemic, inescapable pressure.
Let's talk about those coping mechanisms.
Sure. So Mrs. Bennet represents panicked, unchecked emotion driven by economic terror. Her mind is entirely consumed by the transaction.
The banter between them in the opening chapters really illustrates this perfectly. I mean, Mrs. Bennet comes to her husband vibrating with nervous energy because she's heard about Bingley's $4,000 or $5,000 a year.
She's practically hyperventilating.
Right. She explicitly says what a fine thing this is for their girls. She is entirely focused on claiming this new asset.
And look at Mr. Bennet's response. He feigns complete ignorance of her intent. He asks her, how so? How can it affect them?
Which is so infuriating.
It is. But it's a brilliant display of cynical detachment. He knows exactly what she means, and he knows exactly what the entailment means for his daughters. But his coping mechanism is to retreat into intellectual superiority and sarcasm.
So he just checks out.
Basically, he has essentially given up trying to fix the systemic problem, mostly because he legally cannot, and simply laughs at the absurdity of his wife's panic.
She gets exasperated and says, "You must know that I am thinking of his marrying one of them." It's almost predatory, honestly. A rich man has entered their territory, and one of their daughters must claim him.
It is entirely predatory, but again, driven by survival.
Right. She even urges her husband to go visit Bingley immediately, because the social rules of the era dictate that women cannot just introduce themselves to a new gentleman. The patriarch of the family must make the initial connection.
Yes, the formalities had to be observed.
She tells him, "If you don't go, we can't go." She even tries to flatter him, saying she used to be quite beautiful, but a mother with 5 grown daughters shouldn't think of her own beauty anymore.
To which Mr. Bennet delivers that famously cutting line, pointing out that in such cases, a woman has not often much beauty to think of.
Ouch.
Very ouch. He mocks her anxiety. He tells her she should send the girls by themselves, suggesting Bingley might like her best at the party since she is as handsome as any of them. It is highly entertaining dialogue, but philosophically, it is devastating.
Because it shows a broken system.
Yes, it shows a household fundamentally broken by the economic reality of their society. The parents are utterly divided in their approach to an existential threat.
So if the marriage market is a high-stakes survival game, How do the players actually navigate the field when they first meet? This brings us to the Meryton Ball.
Ah, the famous assembly.
Right. This is where the community finally meets the highly anticipated Mr. Bingley, and he brings with him his immensely wealthy friend, Mr. Darcy. So how do these two men operate in this highly scrutinized environment?
Well, the contrast between the two men at this assembly sets up the entire epistemological crisis of the novel.
Okay, epistemology. Let's unpack that for a second.
Epistemology in philosophy deals with how we know what we know and how we justify our beliefs. Austen is incredibly interested in how human beings gather data about each other and form conclusions.
Right, how we make those first impressions.
Exactly. So at the ball, Mr. Bingley conforms perfectly to the social expectations of an agreeable gentleman. He is warm, affable, he dances every dance.
He's a golden retriever.
He really is. And he is immediately drawn to the eldest Bennet daughter, Jane, who is universally recognized as beautiful, serene, and purely good. Bingley's data points all signal safe and pleasant.
And then we have Mr. Darcy, who is not a golden retriever.
No, absolutely not.
He is described as aloof, incredibly wealthy-like, far wealthier than Bingley, but he refuses to dance with anyone outside of his immediate aristocratic circle. He just stands around looking miserable.
Yes, Darcy is a disaster in this specific social context, and this is where the inciting incident of the novel occurs. Elizabeth Bennet, who is sharp, witty, and prides herself on her keen observation of character, is sitting out a dance.
And she overhears something she wasn't supposed to hear.
Right. She overhears Bingley trying to convince Darcy to dance with her. Darcy looks at Elizabeth coldly and says, "She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me."
Oof. I mean, overhearing someone not just reject you, but essentially declare you unworthy of a moment of their time based on a passing glance. What does that do to Elizabeth's brain in that moment?
It is a devastating blow to the ego. From a philosophical standpoint, this is the moment Elizabeth's entire framework for understanding Mr. Darcy is fundamentally corrupted.
Because her feelings are hurt.
Exactly. She immediately categorizes him as proud, arrogant, and thoroughly disagreeable. Now, is he behaving poorly in that moment? Yes, he is being incredibly rude.
Totally.
But Elizabeth takes this single data point, heavily colored by her own bruised vanity, and extrapolates it into an absolute unshakable truth about his entire character. She stops acting as an objective observer and becomes a biased participant.
Her ego is injured.
Her ego has been injured, and her intellect immediately goes to work building a defensive fortress around that injury.
If you think about the psychological concept of confirmation bias, it perfectly maps onto what Elizabeth is doing here.
Oh, 100%.
Like, think about a time you met someone and they slighted you. Your ego feels threatened, right? You decide right then and there, I dislike this person. And from that second on, every single thing they do is filtered through that hostile lens.
Right. If they are quiet, they are plotting.
Yes. If they donate to charity, they are just showing off. Once Elizabeth decides Darcy is the villain of her narrative, the algorithm of her mind only feeds her evidence that confirms her prejudice.
That's a great way to put it. And Austen brilliantly weaponizes this psychological vulnerability by introducing the antithesis to Darcy shortly after.
George Wickham.
The militia officer, George Wickham. Wickham is handsome, charming, entirely socially fluent, and most importantly, he immediately pays attention to Elizabeth. He flatters her.
He gives her the exact validation Darcy denied her.
Precisely. And then he tells her a deeply tragic tale that perfectly aligns with her newly formed bias against Darcy.
What exactly is the story Wickham sells her? Because she buys it hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, completely. So Wickham claims that he was the godson of the late Mr. Darcy, Mr. Darcy's father. He says the old man loved him and promised him a clerical living, which is, a secure income and a home within the church.
Right.
But according to Wickham, the current Mr. Darcy maliciously and jealously defied his father's dying wishes and gave the living to someone else, leaving Wickham to fend for himself out of pure spite.
Okay, but why does Elizabeth, who is established as the smartest person in her family, not fact-check this? I mean, why does she just accept this massive, scandalous accusation from a guy she literally just met?
Because flattery is the ultimate cognitive blind spot.
Wow.
It really is. Wickham makes Elizabeth feel seen and valued, which soothes the exact wound Darcy inflicted. Furthermore, Wickham's story perfectly slots into her a priori assumption about Darcy.
The narrative she already wrote for him.
Exactly. She has already deduced that Darcy is arrogant and cruel. Therefore, a story about Darcy being cruel to a charming man makes perfect logical sense within her corrupted framework. She prides herself on her rationality, but she is completely blinded.
She trusts appearances and charm because they make her feel good.
Yes, and she rejects awkwardness as deep-seated moral failing. Austen is showing us that human perception is incredibly fragile, and our rational conclusions are almost always subservient to our emotional needs.
So we have these massive misunderstandings built on fragile egos. But the harsh economic reality of the world hasn't gone away, has it?
No, it is always ticking in the background.
Yeah, and it comes knocking right on the Bennet family's door in the form of Mr. Collins. We mentioned the entailment earlier, the legal mechanism that will render the Bennet women homeless. Well, Mr. Collins is the man who inherits it all.
The heir apparent.
And he comes to the Bennet household with a very practical, if deeply unromantic mission.
Mr. Collins is just the embodiment of the absurdities of the social hierarchy. He is described as foolish, sycophantic, completely lacking in self-awareness, and he is heavily backed by an arrogant, aristocratic patron named Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Right, he doesn't come looking for a partner.
No, he comes looking for an accessory to his life, someone to fulfill a role dictated by his patroness. He initially sets his sights on Jane, actually.
Oh, right. But Mrs. Bennet shuts that down.
She does. She quickly redirects him, hinting that Jane is about to be engaged to Mr. Bingley. So, without missing a beat, Collins pivots his affections entirely to Elizabeth.
Just like that. Okay, next sister.
Exactly. It's completely transactional.
His proposal to Elizabeth has to be the most transactional, unromantic pitch in literature. I mean, he basically lists his reasons. First, every clergyman should set the example of matrimony. Second, it will add to his happiness. And third, it is the specific recommendation of Lady Catherine.
It's like a PowerPoint presentation.
It is. He essentially says, "My boss told me to get married. You are geographically and genetically convenient, so congratulations."
It is entirely devoid of emotional intelligence, and Elizabeth, demonstrating her fierce individualism, rejects him absolutely.
Good for her.
But this triggers the massive crisis we were discussing earlier regarding the parents' coping mechanisms. Mrs. Bennet, operating purely on survival mode, is infuriated.
Well, yeah, her lifeline just said no.
Exactly. She threatens to never speak to Elizabeth again if she doesn't marry him. She sees a lifeline being thrown to her drowning family, and her daughter is just swatting it away. But Mr. Bennet steps in and protects Elizabeth's choice.
He delivers that great line.
He tells her, "Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do."
Which is funny, but also kind of unhelpful in the long run.
Very unhelpful. But he favors Elizabeth because she has the intellectual quickness he values, unlike what he views as his silly and ignorant other daughters.
But Elizabeth's victory here is short-lived, right? Because the reality of the marriage market swoops right back in. After Elizabeth rejects Collins, her close friend Charlotte Lucas steps in.
Yes.
Charlotte pays Collins some attention and within days accepts his proposal of marriage. And Elizabeth is horrified. She cannot fathom why her intelligent, sensible friend would tie herself to such a ridiculous man.
Charlotte's choice introduces a profound philosophical clash into the narrative. It's the dialectic of cold pragmatism versus idealistic individualism.
Right, because Charlotte isn't stupid.
Not at all. Charlotte represents the stark reality of the era. She tells Elizabeth, "I am not romantic, I never was. I ask only a comfortable home." Charlotte is 27 years old. She has a small fortune, and she is acutely aware that she's becoming a burden to her parents.
So she's just being realistic.
Exactly. She isn't evil for marrying Mr. Collins. She is surviving. She is securing her economic future in the only way available to a woman of her standing.
I have to play devil's advocate regarding Elizabeth here.
Please do.
We cheer for Elizabeth when she rejects Collins. We love it. But is her rejection actually a noble philosophical rebellion against a broken patriarchal society? Or is it just immense privilege and youthful naivety?
That is a great question.
I mean, she is sitting in a comfortable house with servants, judging her friend for securing a roof over her head. Is Elizabeth's demand for romantic love just a luxury she can only afford because she hasn't actually faced the streets yet?
That is a fascinating tension, and I would argue Austen absolutely intends for us to critique Elizabeth's idealism here. Elizabeth's judgment of Charlotte is steeped in the privilege of an intact family structure.
Right. Her dad just saved her from marrying Collins.
Yes. Her father supports a rebellion, even if that support is practically useless in the long run since he can't protect her after his death. Elizabeth believes her intellect and her moral compass elevate her above the grim transactional necessities of the marriage market.
But Austen doesn't let her off the hook.
Not at all. She uses Charlotte to check Elizabeth's hubris. Charlotte's pragmatic survival strategy forces the reader, and eventually Elizabeth herself, to confront the harsh reality that demanding a marriage of true minds is a luxury not everyone is granted.
So Elizabeth is sitting on a high horse.
A very fragile high horse. And her prized rationality, the very thing she believes makes her superior to her mother and her friend, is about to be completely dismantled.
Oh, the dismantling. Okay, so this happens in what is arguably the climax of the novel's philosophical journey. Elizabeth is visiting Charlotte, who is now married and living near the sprawling estate of Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Right, Hunsford.
And Mr. Darcy happens to be visiting his aunt, Lady Catherine. To make matters incredibly tense, Elizabeth has just learned from Darcy's cousin that Darcy was the one who convinced Mr. Bingley to leave Netherfield and abandon his budding relationship with Jane.
Yes, Darcy believed the Bennet family was too vulgar and that Jane didn't actually love Bingley.
So Elizabeth is seething. I mean, her sister's heart is broken, and Darcy is the architect of that pain. And it is at this precise moment of maximum fury and resentment that Darcy walks into the room completely unannounced and suddenly proposes to her.
And it is a terrible pitch.
It is the worst proposal of all time.
It is catastrophic. He declares his ardent love, but true to his tragic flaw of pride, he completely ruins the proposal by dwelling on how difficult it was for him to overcome his disgust at her family's lower social standing.
He actually says that to her face.
To her face. He talks about their lack of connections, their inappropriate behavior. He is essentially fighting his own societal conditioning out loud in front of her. He tells her he loves her against his better judgment, against his character, and against his class expectations.
Wow. And Elizabeth, predictably, unleashes a torrent of righteous anger. She doesn't just say no, she decimates him.
She tears him apart.
She accuses him of arrogant disdain for the feelings of others. She explicitly accuses him of destroying Jane's happiness. And then she brings up Wickham. She accuses Darcy of ruining Wickham's life, of cruelly withholding the living promise to him out of sheer malice.
She lays it all out there.
She tells him he is the last man in the world she could ever be prevailed upon to marry. Darcy leaves, reeling. But he doesn't just walk away. The next day, he finds Elizabeth walking alone and hands her a letter.
The famous letter.
This letter is the turning point of the entire narrative. What exactly is in this letter that breaks her worldview so completely?
Well, the letter is a masterwork of systematic defense. Darcy does not renew his proposal, but he demands she read his explanation of the two primary charges she laid against him. First, regarding Jane and Bingley. He admits that he separated them.
He owns up to it.
He does. He admits that he thought the Bennet family's behavior was deeply inappropriate. But he states unequivocally that he observed Jane closely and genuinely believed she did not love Bingley.
Which, to be fair, Jane is very reserved.
She is. She was serene, pleasant, but he saw no symptom of actual deep affection. He believed he was saving his friend from a one-sided marriage. While we can argue this is highly paternalistic and flawed, it shifts his motivation from pure malice to misguided loyalty.
Okay, but the real bombshell is the second part of the letter, regarding Wickham. Because Elizabeth's entire philosophical framework right now rests on Wickham being the innocent victim.
Exactly. And Darcy reveals the absolute objective truth about George Wickham. Wickham was indeed the godson of the late Mr. Darcy, and the late Mr. Darcy did intend to provide for him.
Right.
However, Wickham wrote to the current Mr. Darcy saying he had no intention of taking orders and entering the church. Instead, he asked for the value of the living in cash so he could study law.
He just wanted a buyout.
Yes. Darcy agreed and gave him £3,000. In the context of the era, this is a massive sum, and Wickham completely squandered this money in idleness and degenerate gambling.
Oh, wow. But Wickham didn't stop there, did he?
No. When he ran out of money, he came back and demanded the clerical living anyway. Darcy refused.
Because obviously.
Right, and then what does Wickham do? He disappears, only to resurface the previous summer with a horrifying plot. He manages to locate Darcy's younger sister, Georgiana, who was only 15 years old at the time.
15.
Through deception, he convinced this teenage girl to elope with him. Why? Because Georgiana Darcy has a fortune of £30,000.
Oh my God.
The interest on that alone is an immense yearly income. Wickham was planning to ruin a 15-year-old girl just to get his hands on her inheritance and exact revenge on Darcy.
And Darcy stopped it.
Darcy only discovered the plot a day or two before the elopement and intervened, keeping the entire scandal a desperate secret to protect his sister's reputation.
So when Elizabeth reads this, I mean, she goes through this profound, agonizing psychological event. In modern philosophical terms, we might call it an ego death.
Yes, an ego death, absolutely.
Yeah. Think about how physically painful it is to be undeniably fact-checked on a deeply held belief. Like, have you ever been in an argument where you are so absolutely certain you are right, you're practically vibrating with self-righteousness, and then someone produces a piece of evidence that proves you are completely embarrassingly wrong?
It's awful. The ground just falls out from under you.
You realize you were the fool.
And Austen captures the mechanics of this beautifully. Elizabeth has to read the letter multiple times before the truth of it begins to penetrate the armor of her prejudice. She realizes her entire perception of these two men was inverted.
Completely upside down.
She had prided herself on her brilliant discernment, yet she fell for Wickham's performative charm while ignoring the fact that he was spreading malicious, unprovoked gossip.
Which is a huge red flag.
A huge red flag. And she condemned Darcy for his awkwardness, ignoring the fact that his actions, providing the £3,000 initially, protecting his young sister, were rooted in profound responsibility and honor.
She actually says something like, "Till this moment, I never knew myself."
Yes. Till this moment, I never knew myself. She realizes her rationality was entirely compromised by vanity. She was pleased with Wickham's flattery and offended by Darcy's neglect, and on that fragile emotional foundation, she'd built an entire fortress of prejudice.
It's the total destruction of her hubris. And it's not just Elizabeth, is it? Darcy, too, undergoes an ego death.
Yes, he does. Her furious reprimand during the proposal forces him to realize that his pride, his aristocratic entitlement, and his belief that his status insulated him from having to be considerate or polite were deeply flawed.
He realizes he was acting like a jerk.
He realizes that he behaved, as he later admits, ungentlemanly. Truth, Austen is arguing, is incredibly difficult to access. It cannot be reached while we are blinded by our own ego, our vanity, or our societal conditioning.
It requires a painful stripping away of our preconceptions to see reality as it actually is.
Exactly.
But, philosophy is great in theory, but it only matters when it meets the real world. And the real world hits the Bennet family like a freight train shortly after this.
The ultimate test of all these theories.
Right. So Elizabeth's youngest sister, Lydia, who is foolish, vain, and completely unchecked by her parents, goes to Brighton following the militia. And the unthinkable happens. Lydia elopes with George Wickham.
Which is the worst possible scenario.
Why is this so catastrophic? I mean, modern readers might think, okay, she ran away with a bad guy, that's her problem, she made a bad choice. But it wasn't just her problem, was it?
No, it was an existential threat to the entire family because of the mechanics of social contagion in Regency England.
Social contagion.
Yes. In this society, if a young woman ran away with a man without being married, her reputation was destroyed forever. She was a fallen woman. But the taint of that scandal did not stop with her. It operated literally like a virus.
Oh, so it spreads to the sisters.
Exactly. The assumption of the era was that moral failings were somewhat inherent or environmental to the family unit. Therefore, if one sister was ruined, the entire genetic and moral line of the family was deemed corrupt.
So nobody would want to marry Jane or Elizabeth either.
Right. No respectable family would ever merge their assets with a corrupt line. Therefore, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, and Kitty would be entirely unmarriageable. The entire Bennet family faced inescapable, total ostracization.
Because of one sister's mistake.
Yes. And what makes it worse is that Wickham had no intention of actually marrying Lydia. He was fleeing massive gambling debts. Lydia just happened to be a convenient, willing companion for his escape to London.
Elizabeth is just devastated. She happens to be visiting Darcy's magnificent estate, Pemberley, with her aunt and uncle, when she receives the news via a letter from Jane.
And Darcy actually walks in on her just as she's reading it.
Talk about bad timing. In her panic, she just tells him everything, and then she watches him leave. She is convinced that this is the end. The stigma on her family is now permanent and undeniable.
She believes Darcy will never look at her again.
Right, that he will distance himself as quickly as possible to avoid being associated with such a disastrous, scandalous family.
But this is where Austen moves from epistemology, how we know things, to ethics, how we act in the world. Specifically, she demonstrates a philosophy of virtue ethics.
Okay, break down virtue ethics for us.
Virtue ethics argues that morality is not just about following rules or having good intentions. It is about the character you build through your actions. You are what you do, not what you say.
So actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. Wickham possesses performative morality. He sounds good, he looks handsome, he says all the right things to make people like him, but his actions are selfish and destructive. Darcy, however, demonstrates active morality.
He doesn't run away from the scandal.
No, he doesn't.
He secretly tracks down the couple in the slums of London. He discovers that Wickham will only marry Lydia if his massive debts are paid off and he is given a substantial income. And Darcy pays it.
He pays off all of it.
He pays off Wickham's enormous gambling debts, purchases a military commission for him, and settles a sum of money on them.
He essentially bribes a predator into marrying the girl he abducted just to save the family of the woman who rejected him.
That is wild.
He does all of this at great personal financial cost, and more importantly, at great personal effort and emotional cost. I mean, he has to sit down and negotiate with a man he thoroughly despises, the very man who tried to ruin his own sister.
And the most crucial element of this moral action is the secrecy, right?
Yes. He does not do it to win Elizabeth's favor. He specifically instructs that she must never know. He does it because it is the right thing to do, and because he feels a profound sense of responsibility for not exposing Wickham's true character to the community earlier.
Okay, I want to push back on this because it's a point that often frustrates modern readers when they read this book.
Sure.
Darcy fixes the problem, yes. But how does he fix it? With an overwhelming, massive pile of cash.
That's true.
It is a massive flex of aristocratic power. He essentially buys the Bennet family's salvation. Doesn't this just prove that at the end of the day, money is the ultimate reality? Like, he doesn't solve the problem with love or philosophical enlightenment. He solves it by throwing thousands of pounds at a criminal. Doesn't economic determinism win in the end?
If we only look at the mechanism of the transaction, you could definitely argue that. But if we look at the character behind the transaction, we see the philosophical evolution. Austen is a realist.
Right.
She knows perfectly well that money is power, and she never pretends otherwise. But the moral growth is demonstrated in the application of that power.
Ah, okay. The application.
Yes. At the beginning of the novel, Darcy uses his power and status to isolate himself, to judge others harshly, and to interfere in his friend's life out of aristocratic snobbery. He views his wealth as a shield that separates him from the vulgarities of the world.
So he uses it as a wall.
Exactly. But by the end of the novel, he uses his immense power and wealth to enact grace. He wades into the mud of London to save a family that has treated him poorly, to rescue a foolish girl who means nothing to him, and to take responsibility for his own past silences.
That's a huge shift.
It is the synthesis of power and grace. It is not the money that makes him good. It is his willingness to labor in secret, risking his own reputation, to apply that money for the salvation of others.
That distinction, the application of power for grace rather than oppression, really paves the way for the resolution. With the family saved, Bingley returns to Netherfield, realizes Jane still loves him, and finally proposes.
Which is lovely.
It is. And then we have the ultimate showdown between the old aristocratic order and individual agency. Lady Catherine de Bourgh hears a rumor that Darcy is going to marry Elizabeth.
And she is furious.
Furious. She travels all the way to Longbourn to intimidate Elizabeth into promising she will never marry him. She threatens her, insults her family, and demands submission to the social hierarchy.
Lady Catherine represents the coercive, deterministic forces of society trying to force Elizabeth back into her designated box.
But Elizabeth is not the same person she was.
No, she has grown. She has survived her ego death. She sees reality clearly, and she refuses to yield. She tells Lady Catherine, "I am only resolved to act in that manner, which will, in my own opinion, constitute my happiness, without reference to you, or to any person so wholly unconnected with me."
Such a mic drop moment.
It is. She completely rejects the authority of the aristocratic hierarchy to dictate her life choices.
And when Darcy learns of this defiance from his furious aunt, it gives him the hope he needs to propose a second time.
Yes, because he realizes her feelings must have changed.
Right. And this time, they approach each other not with pride and prejudice, but with humility, self-awareness, and deep mutual respect. They have synthesized their flaws into a mature, equal partnership.
It is a remarkable journey. We've traveled from that cynical opening premise of marriage as a pure economic transaction, driven by the legal terror of the entailment.
All the way through the ego death.
Right. We've moved through the blinding, messy fog of our own egos, confirmation biases, and the vulnerability of human perception. And we arrive at a place where genuine truth, achieved through painful self-reflection, allows for active moral virtue and real, profound human connection.
Austen provides a roadmap for how to see clearly in a world obsessed with surfaces.
She really does.
And, while you listening probably don't have to worry about the legal entailment of your family estate or a pompous cousin trying to claim your dining room, the core challenges remain exactly the same.
Completely the same.
We still navigate a world defined by snap judgments based on a quick glance or a swipe on a screen. We still deal with people wearing carefully curated social masks, and we certainly still navigate immense economic pressures that influence the choices we feel we are allowed to make. The epistemology of first impressions is as relevant today as it was in 1813.
Absolutely. The mechanisms of human ego and societal pressure haven't changed. Only the wardrobe has.
Which brings me to a final, slightly provocative thought to leave you with.
Oh, let's hear it.
Pride and Prejudice is beloved today as a story of a fierce, independent woman rebelling against the stifling expectations of her society. We cheer for Elizabeth when she rejects Mr. Collins and stands up to Lady Catherine.
We love a rebel.
We do. Yet how does the story actually end? It ends with her fulfilling the ultimate, most conservative societal expectation imaginable. She marries a massively rich man, secures an immense estate, and achieves total financial dominance.
It is a bit of a paradox.
Exactly. So the paradox I want you to mull over is this. Does true rebellion against society actually exist in this world? Or is the ultimate goal simply finding a way to conform to society's rules that doesn't completely crush your soul in the process? Are we all just looking for the most comfortable way to surrender?
That is a deep thought.
Imagine that brightly lit ballroom again. You survived the interaction, you won the game, but whose game were you playing all along?